Hi everyone, it's Felicia. Welcome back to my channel. So I wanted to go over the different types of abuse and just provide some information about those. I am going to do videos on each one of these separately, and I actually want to do a whole series on spiritual and religious abuse. And talking about cults and brainwashing and things like that. But this one's going to be just kind of a quick overview. So I just wanted to talk about the different types of abuse. All of these are just as important as the other one. When you hear the term abuse, people typically think of physical or sexual abuse. Well, those are only two kinds of abuse. There's actually far more, and there's even more than these. There's like abuse of children and or abuse using children, etc. But that's like there's just so much. I'm just going to kind of go over the main ones here. So as you can see, I have listed physical abuse. So this would include hitting, punching, kicking, pushing, causing harm to one's physical person. Additionally, physical abuse also includes throwing objects at or near a person, slamming doors, punching holes in walls, things like that. That still all falls under physical abuse because someone is using their physical prowess to intimidate and or threaten someone else. Physical abuse. The next one, sexual abuse. This would include any sort of violation of sexual boundaries in any way, shape, or form. So that could be touching over or under the clothes. People usually think of penetration only when they hear sexual abuse. That is not the case. So fondling, again, over or under the clothes, coercing someone into engaging in sexual acts when they don't really want to, but guilt tripping them into doing that, using sexual slurs and derogatory language. Sexual harassment is also a subcategory of sexual abuse. Taking pictures or sharing pictures of asexual nature, including nude photos without someone's permission, sexual abuse. Exposing oneself to someone else without their permission. So really any sexual behavior that is non-consensual and or coerced is sexual abuse. Verbal abuse. Verbal abuse is one of the more common types of abuse. And when you're in an abusive relationship, abuse in relationships generally starts with verbal and psychological abuse. So verbal abuse would be the name calling, critical statements, using your words to tear someone down. Psychological abuse. This is actually the most common form of abuse. This would include mind games, brainwashing tactics, the use of sarcasm, passive-aggressive behavior, manipulation, gaslighting, all of that sort of stuff. So really, you're psychologically tearing someone down and making them feel like they're crazy in order to isolate them and go through that chart of coercion that I talked about in a previous video. And again, this is the most common form of abuse. This occurs in abusive relationships before sexual or physical abuse because the person has to prime you to be ready to accept that level of abuse. So they start out with the isolation, which is a type of psychological abuse. And then they will completely manipulate and monopolize your sense of perception. Then they can threaten, humiliate, degrade you, etc. So it's all part of that brainwashing process. Financial abuse. So this is controlling one's access to finances, not allowing someone to be financially independent, misusing someone's financial resources. And I have seen this with parents who will take their child's money or will spend their estate money, their allowance, their college fund, etc. Financial abuse could also be requiring the person to do all of the work both inside and outside of the home, which I've certainly seen those cases as well. Whereas the abuser just kind of sits at home and expects everybody else to take care of them. So they are financially abusive in that way. Other types of, or examples, I should say, of financial abuse would be severely controlling access to utilities. And these are all real examples that I'm not making these examples up. So things like requiring that the thermostat be set to 85 degrees in the summer, especially here in Phoenix. That's just ridiculous and should be criminal. So basically sweating someone out, not allowing them to be comfortable, etc. Controlling access to water. I've heard of a few examples of this, controlling how long someone can be in the shower. And then if you go over that, there's a punishment to be expected. Controlling how much you spend on food or not allowing you access to actually purchase basic needs, etc. Spiritual and religious abuse. This is also much more common than I think people realize. I have a lot of cases of religious abuse. Religious institutions will often employ many of these tactics, especially the psychological and financial, sometimes physical and sexual. That is certainly much more rampant in religious institutions than I think people are aware of. But specifically, spiritual or religious abuse would be not allowing someone to practice their religious beliefs or engage in ceremonies, services, etc. Not allowing you to listen to religious music or utilize sacred texts. Essentially just not allowing you any sort of religious or spiritual freedom. The flip side of that would be someone who is using religion or spirituality as a justification for the abuse. So saying something like, well, in the Bible it says this, therefore I'm entitled to do this. And there may or may not be any basis for that, or it's taken out of context. But abuse is abuse. It doesn't matter who justifies it. There are cultures around the world who do justify abuse. That doesn't make it morally okay. We can't go around hurting people just because your culture or your religious belief says that's okay, that it's not okay. So that would be the flip side of that. And I've certainly, again, seen all of these. Systemic abuse. This is starting to be more talked about, but still not as widely talked about as it should be. This would be where an entire system is put in place that is actually abusive or oppressive. So like this society in particular is systemically abusive and or oppressive towards minorities in general, towards individuals of other races and ethnicities, towards individuals who have some sort of disability, whether it's a visible or invisible disability. The LGBTQ population, don't even get me started on the war on women right now. That is all systemic abuse, where there's this large system and it has practices or traditions, etc., in place that systematically abuse and or oppress a population, usually some type of minority population. And then institutional, so these would be your institutions, educational institutions, healthcare institutions, prisons, correctional facilities, institutions, religious institutions, etc., that utilize abusive practices and get away with it because they're so big. So I'm going to start talking about some of these things, and I'm going to call out some of these systems and institutions in place that are doing some of these things. Somebody needs to. So this is just a really quick overview of some of the different types of abuse and some of the examples that you might see. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe, and I will see you all in my next video. Thanks so much.